Eagles Entertainment.
With the 10th pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and we are going to wrap up our really fun Scout Story segment this week, talking wide receivers. But before we get there, for Mr. Relevant this week, the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, is going to drop by to talk through the top players at each position that are in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Practice gets underway this week from Mobile, Alabama. We're going to be breaking it all down. Daily podcast right here on this feed. You don't want to go anywhere. Make sure you stay subscribed right here to the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand. After my conversation with Jim, I'm going to catch up with Chris McPherson, who will be joining me daily here throughout the week as we recap every single day, every single practice that happens from Mobile, Alabama. So C-Mac and I, we're going to react to what Jim had to say at the top of the show. We're also going to kind of set the table for what all the NFL teams, all 32 teams, are doing down here in Mobile, Alabama. After that, we'll wrap things up with Scout Stories. Again, the final edition where Eagles Director of Player Personnel, Brandon Brown, is going to drop by to talk about the wide receiver position and how to evaluate those guys from college to the NFL. Tomorrow, here on the feed, Ben Fennell and Dane Brugler drop by for what has become one of my favorite exercises that we do every single year, a Senior Bowl only mock draft. Ben and Dane are both going to draft teams. They're going to fill out entire rosters based only on Senior Bowl players. Really, really fun exercise that'll help get you ready for the week of practice and obviously for the game that culminates on Saturday. That said, let's get things started with the one, Jim Nagy and Mr. Relevant.
It's time for Mr. Relevant.
Well, excited to welcome back here to the Journey to the Draft podcast to help preview this week's Senior Bowl is the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, and that is Jim Nagy. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, Fran, awesome to be back, man. Love coming on with you.
All right, well, let's get through some of the top players at each of these positions. And the way I'll kind of separate this is the same way we did it previously. A guy that I'm excited about and a guy I'm interested to kind of hear you talk more about. And we'll start at quarterback, where that's going to be one of the big discussion points all week long during practice. Really excited about Kenny Pickett from Pitt, obviously a huge senior season. And I'm interested to know more about Malik Willis from Liberty, another guy that I'm really excited about as well with his ceiling. Interested to kind of get your thoughts on both Kenny and Malik.
Yeah, Kenny's the guy that accepted his invite a year ago, and he decided to go back to school. And we had some really good dialogue, kind of got to know each other through that last year. And have been at the Manning camp for, a few years with him. So it's cool to finally get him to Mobile, but obviously made a big jump this year on tape. Like we told him last year, high end fourth round, some teams had fifth and sixth round grades on him. So really, really big jump. I think the biggest thing for Kenny was he was fully healthy this year. The mobility, I mean, he was just creating more. He was getting out of the pocket more, across the board. You look at his numbers, the stats kind of paint a picture of the jump that he made. But, I think for Kenny, this will be a really good opportunity for him to show these teams down here, like what kind of guy he is. I mean, I've been around him. He's really charismatic. He's been kind of the alpha of the alphas at the Manning camp over the last few years. He's got a really cool way about him, kind of Joe Burrow-ish in a way. Like he just, guys kind of gravitate to him. So just like for all the quarterbacks, it'll be a big week in terms of getting in a huddle and getting under center and spitting out verbiage and, all the stuff he'll have to do at the next level. But, no, I think the more Kenny's around the teams, the better off he'll be. Just letting them kind of feel who he is. And then huge week for Malik, man. I mean, I've heard people say they think he's got the best tools in this class. It's hard to argue that. He's a big, thick, physical kid, very strong, hard to get on the ground, can create with his strength and his legs. Yeah, he's just a playmaker. The guy, and he was forced to be at Liberty. I mean, the guy had to do a lot on his own. No knock on the supporting cast, but big arm. I think we'll see that. I think anyone with an overwhelming trait, regardless of position, can really impress in a live setting, and I think Malik will do that with his arm. So yeah, excited to get both those guys down here. Both have a chance to be. Right now they got a really good chance to be first round picks. How high, we'll see. But I would be surprised if both of those guys don't go in the first round.
Yeah, and obviously that's going to be the case for a bunch of the quarterbacks down there, is just really kind of proving their wares in front of all 32 NFL teams. Let's get to the guys sharing the backfield with those quarterbacks, and that's the running back position. Rachaad White is a guy that's really intriguing to me because I feel like there's a lot of downhill, big physical grinders in this class, not as many of the dynamic pass catchers, the dual threats, and Rachaad definitely has that kind of skill set. Interesting to kind of get your thoughts on Rachaad. And then Dameon Pierce is a personal favorite of mine from Florida, just one of the most physical, competitive, tough backs really in the last couple of years.
Rachaad, really fluid athlete, one of the best athletes in this group. Like you said, versatility, good out of the backfield. He's dynamic in the open field. He can make people miss. He's got some big playability. So it'll be anyone that's as good in the pass game as Rachaad White is. We'll have a good week down here. And then we're with you here in the office on Dameon Pierce. He's one of our favorite guys as well. I just kind of sum him up. He's an NFL running back. He's hard to tackle. He's powerful. He's really good on contact. He can create on his own. I think he's shiftier than people give him credit for. He's not just a plow horse, big 220-pound back. He's got nimbleness to him, and he can catch it in the pass game and make plays. He's a 3-down back. I think he's going to be an NFL starter. It depends on where he goes, whether that's right away or that's eventually. But I think that guy's going to start in the league.
Let's get to wide receiver, where a really interesting group, a diverse group. Calvin Austin from Memphis has been so dynamic whenever on the field. Punt return, kick return, obviously as a wide receiver. And then Christian Watson from the FCS level at North Dakota State. Interesting to kind of get your thoughts on both of these guys. Very different in terms of body type, but they can change the game in some similar ways.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. That's how I was going to cue it up. Very different body types, but similar speed. Calvin's a cool story, former walk-on at Memphis, and to see what he's been able to do, it's amazing. A kid like that can fall through the cracks. Someone that fast can fall through the cracks out of high school, but no, dynamic with the ball in his hands. We've had some good success with Memphis guys over the last few years with Tony Pollard and Antonio Gibson. We're excited to get Calvin down here. He brings that speed element, and he does it in both phases. He can impact two phases of the game. And then with Christian Watson, a guy that we're really excited about. He's 6'4", 210-pound guy that can really roll. The speed he looks like he's playing at a different speed at the FCS level. Really unchallenged when he's trying to get vertical. I mean, he just runs away from people. So I think the biggest thing for Christian during the week is proving his hands, cleaning some of that up. There's just some catch consistency stuff, that has some teams uneasy right now, but I think he's gotten better in that area, and a fluid 6'4", 210-pound guy that can roll. Sky's the limit, man. I think he's got as high a ceiling as anyone that we're bringing down here during the week.
Yeah, you could say the same about Cincinnati's Alec Pierce as well. Similar kind of body type and skill set. Interesting to see both of those guys perform here in drills and Senior Bowl. Let's get to the tight end spot. Jeremy Ruckert. I know this is a group overall that you're really high on. Jeremy Ruckert, just an enforcer as a blocker. What he does, pass game, run game, an underrated receiver as well. Interested to get your thoughts there. And then Greg Dulcich from UCLA, one of the underclassmen who had that Senior Bowl eligibility. Interested to learn more about Greg.
Yeah, so Ruckert's a guy that I think is going to be a better pro than college player. If you just look at the numbers, I think he's going to be more productive in the pass game. And I'm not pointing the finger at Ohio State staff. Nobody does a better job than those guys do on offense. But there's just so many balls to go around, and the receivers that they have there. So like you said, he plays with an edge as a blocker. He's got the frame to play on the end of the line. Has some edge to him, which is really cool. And when you pull up the all targets cut up, you see what he can do in the passing game. It's just kind of, if you're going game by game, you're like, man, we wish this guy were getting the ball more. So, I just bring it back to last year at that position with Trey McKitty from Georgia, came here with only 6 catches. He had like 11.5-inch hands. He caught everything during the week, and he goes in the 3rd round to the LA Chargers and had a good rookie year. I think Jeremy could prove the same thing over the course of the week. Dulcich is a guy that, we usually do, we really work hard to figure out these juniors and their grad status going, over the summer and spring. But Greg kind of popped on our radar late in December. We were not prepared for that one. So I'm glad we were able to fit him in. But, a productive player in the passing game at UCLA. And the thing really, if you just want to pick one thing, he's got a pull away gear. in terms of a route runner, he's got to work at the top of route a little bit. But in terms of crossers and verticals, when he's running the seam, like if he can catch it on the move, he's going to run away from you. So a guy we're really excited to get because we weren't really expecting to have him. Those are two good ones at a really strong group.
Yeah, Dulcich, one of those guys that could be a 3-level threat in the pass game, and he'll line up with his hand in the dirt as well in the run game, obviously running the ball plenty in that Chip Kelly offense. Let's get to the offensive line. One guy I've been excited about for a long time, and maybe it's just because of what Jordan Mailata has done here in Philadelphia. Daniel Faalele at Minnesota, just a really intriguing background coming from Minnesota. Interested to get your thoughts on Daniel, but then also Luke Gedeke, I feel like kind of flying under the radar. 2 right tackles here. Gedeke has played both inside and outside. Interested to get your thoughts on Luke and how he first kind of got onto your guys' radar.
So Daniel is he's a humongous human being. It's obvious when you watch tape. I think that sticks out, Fran. You'll see this from I know you've seen it from the end zone copy. You see this guy getting his stance. I mean, he's lower than guys on the line that are 6'2" and 6'3". So I've had some teams, and some people in the media ask me if I think Daniel can play some guard, and why not? You tend to say no. There's kind of a diminishing returns aspect when you get too tall. But with his ability to play low and get under people, I don't see why he couldn't do that. I think he's an immediate starter for somebody. He's just rare traits, and I don't use the word rare. Don't use that very much, but he is a rare guy when it comes to size, and he is light on his feet for a man that big. And then for Luke at Central Michigan, he's been a little bit overshadowed by Bernard Raymond, and Bernard's going to be a really good player. I think he's probably going to go late 1 to mid 2, somewhere in that range right now, just to be conservative. But and he's gotten a lot of pub because he's from Austria, and that's a cool background. But yeah, Luke is another guy that we didn't know a lot about because when you just looked at the Central Michigan bio over the summer, they didn't have his 2017 year at Wisconsin Stevens Point in there, so we thought Luke was a junior. So yeah, we got on him a little late, but he was an easy guy to warm up to. Man, he's a natural football player. He plays with good leverage. We're going to play him at some center down here during the week. I think he's a guy that can play all 3 spots, center, guard, and tackle. And again, as much as hype as Bernard has received, we have a scout on our staff that did the Midwest for us this year who is has been one of the best evaluators in the NFL for the last 25 years, Andy Dengler. He feels like Luke might end up being, having a longer and better pro career than Bernard. And he thinks, and he likes Bernard a bunch too. So, I think Luke's the guy coming into the week is a little undervalued right now, but if Robert Hainsey from Notre Dame got all the way up to the 3rd last year, it is not out of the realm of possibility at all for Luke Gedeke to go on day 2.
Honestly, that was the name I wrote down, Robert Hainsey, while I was watching Luke. So I'm glad that you made that connection. Let's go to the defensive side. I feel like one of the more underrated players in this entire class is Cameron Thomas, the pass rusher from San Diego State, playing in the Mountain West, has been so productive. And then interested to get your thoughts on Amari Barno as well, the pass rusher from Virginia Tech.
Yeah, a couple guys that don't get talked about a lot, but are really good players. You brought up Cam, so. I didn't scout Max Crosby when he was coming out. It was my first year at the Senior Bowl, and he was a junior, so I never really watched him. I've heard some of those comparisons. Man, if that's close, that says a lot for Cam Thomas. But no, he's a versatile guy. He's like 6'5", 260. Can move up and down the line. I mean, they've played him everywhere there at San Diego State. He has initial quickness to win on the inside. He's got enough to length and first step to win on the edge too. So. Just a guy that can get home for multiple alignments, which I think he'll have a good week down here rushing the passer. And then Barno is one of the higher end athletes in this class. I think there's other pass rushers that are being talked about more. I think Amari kind of gets lost in that group, which is crazy. I mean, he's been really productive, made a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. But when you talk about a guy with like a basketball frame that he's still growing into, extremely long. In fluid off the edge, I think his best football is way ahead of him. So, teams that are looking to like really hit on a traits pass rusher, I think Barno is going to be one of those guys.
He's long, lean, explosive, a fun player to study on film. Former linebacker, made the move to DN. Let's get to defensive tackles. A stronger group compared to last year. Haskell Garrett from Ohio State kind of leads this group for me. I'm excited to get your thoughts on Haskell. And then Neil Farrell from LSU and what he's done in the interior of that Tigers defense.
Yeah, a stronger group last year. Last year was really thin on the interior D-line. I like this group we're bringing down here a lot this year. Haskell's a guy that we invited a year ago. He decided to go back to Ohio State, kind of surprised us, but he started a little slow this year in my opinion, but really start getting cranked up in the middle of the year. So he's a guy that I think he's a classic 3 technique. He has get off quickness, but he also has shock, and he's stout. He's not a guy that's going to get run out of there on rundowns, and so and he's a guy that can penetrate and get upfield and make plays. So. Haskell. So we feel like we're finally getting him. We thought we were going to have him last year, so good to get him down here. And then Neil from LSU, Neil Farrell from LSU is a local guy here, Murphy High School here in Mobile, Alabama. A year ago, Neil was on the fence all the way through August, whether he was going to play through COVID or not. And he came back, decided at the last minute to play. And I think it was kind of to his detriment. I think COVID seemed to hit the bigger guys more so, in our opinion, from what we saw on tape, that it hit those guys more last year. But Neil had by far his best year. He came back. He was better stamina, in better shape, playing with better pad level. A really good rundowns player. I think he's a base down starter at the next level. On the inside, whether that's at a 1 or a 3 or, but a guy that's hard to root out of there. So Neil earned it. He really did earn it. Over the summer, I would have said Neil was probably below the line, but cool to see him make that jump this year.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch, just holding the point. Really, really strong player, active player for LSU. At linebacker, a couple of those Georgia kids, obviously really, really exciting what that defense did this year. Quay Walker, Channing Tindall. I'm really excited to hear about Channing. 0 career starts, but just traits all for days. An interesting player. I'm interested to get your thoughts there. And then Troy Anderson from Montana State. They go to the FCS title this year. I feel like this is a player that you used to work with the Patriots. So this is a Patriots player all day with his versatile skill set. Interested to learn more about Channing Tindall and Troy Anderson.
Yeah, Channing's really fast, man. It's just like, let's not belabor the point. Like Channing Tindall can fly. I think he's going to be, 4.47, 4.48 range, which is, I just bring it back to like Bobby Wagner coming out of Utah State. We had him there in Seattle when I was there. That's where Bobby was. Similar size, similar speed. Like you said, hasn't been a full-time starter, but when he's out there, dang, is he good? Like late in the year, everyone can see those PFF grades from late in the year, but even getting the grades from the Georgia defensive staff and seeing how this guy was grading out, sky's the limit. I would be surprised at this point if Channing gets out of day 2, just based off feedback from the league. I think he's could be a 3rd round guy, but if you're running 4.4s at linebacker, I mean, there's a really good shot you go in round 2. So good player. And then Troy Anderson. Yeah. My hope for Troy is that he just goes to an open-minded staff, man. I hope he goes somewhere where people are open-minded and using that full skill set. So, I think there's some split camp in the NFL right now. Like, what is he? Do we keep him on defense and let him continue to develop, and develop the reactions and being more of an instinctive football player on defense? Or do we put him back on offense where he had background at running back and quarterback and make him kind of a Taysom Hill type weapon? But, either way, he's going to be a core special teams player. He's 6'0", 3'7". He's another guy that can really run. So he's going to find a home somewhere. It's just kind of where that home is now. But, talking to the people at Montana State, he sounds like an absolute stud of a kid and a guy that everyone's going to want in their locker room. So I think the interview process down here is going to be really, really good for Troy. I just can't wait to get him down here and see how they use him.
Going to the cornerback spot, Roger McCreary, real shot at being a first-round pick, one of a handful of guys in Mobile that I think you could say that about. And Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati winning the Thorpe Award as the top DB in college football. Let's get your thoughts on Roger and Kobe.
Yeah, so Roger's another Mobile area guy, Williamson High School here in town. So I've been watching him for a while. He's his only offer, FBS, was to South Alabama coming out of high school, and then he got a late offer from Auburn and flipped it. But I think he plays with an edge. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. I think a great profile of that was the Iron Bowl game against Alabama. He competed his tail off, got his hands on a bunch of balls. He's feisty. He's good at the top of a route. He's a good reactionary athlete, so he can match routes. I think, the question for Roger will just be length and top end speed. But if you want a guy that can cover, Roger McCreary, just bottom lining it without can he cover or can't he cover? Yes, he can cover.
Right.
And I think he's got cover skills to move inside, which we didn't see a lot of there at Auburn. And with Kobe Bryant, Thorpe Award winner, I think everyone's got Sauce Gardner, his teammate there, the junior, projected higher in the draft. But I think it was, having Sauce on the opposite side. Kobe saw a lot of attention. He's long, he's athletic. He can really get off the ground. You talk about a guy that can is going to be hard to throw over the top of. It's Kobe Bryant. So I think teams that like to play press man are really going to like him. Some of the off-man stuff in terms of technique, like there's some stuff you want to clean up. But he's a big, long athlete. So, and again, sounds like a culture changer there when you talk to Luke Fickell. He really credits two guys on that roster, and that's Desmond Ridder, the quarterback, and Kobe Bryant. So, those two guys are both two of our top corners coming down here this year.
And my last question, Jim, Brian Cook from Cincinnati, another player who really helped himself going back for that final year, just like Kobe Bryant, and Tyson Anderson, the safety from Toledo. Interested to get your thoughts on Brian Cook and Tyson Anderson.
Yeah, we lost Brian. It was a bummer, man. He had to get a postseason surgery. He'd basically been playing with that, I think, from about the end of October. So, one of our favorite guys here. He's one of our highest graded safeties. They had James Wiggins and Derek Forrest come out of there last year. So James was a backup rotational player. The staff there gave us a heads up over the summer that this guy was on, he was on the come. And to see him get better really until about that injury happened, from September or through the middle of October, he was getting better and better every week. One of the most physical safeties in the class, really good tackler, former HBCU guy coming over from Howard and going back to his hometown to play for the Bearcats. Man, I hated to lose him because I think he's going to be a really good player at the next level. And then Tyson's a really cool kind of hybrid player, tall, lanky, is going to run in the 4.4s. But, he almost played like a big nickel there at Toledo. You saw him matched up in a lot of man coverage stuff, even against wide receivers, which is a tough matchup. And Tyson did a good job. So it's a big week for him and all the other group of five and small school guys. It's just the ramp up in level of competition. And, he's big, long, and fast. And so he's going to project as a core teams player. He's done a bunch of that at the college level, one of the best special teams players coming out in this year's draft. And now it's okay. What is he though? We know the tools where there's a lot to like there, but where is the home ultimately? Is a kind of a cover one, cover three, drop down safety? Is it as a big nickel? Is it a big dime? Can we put weight on him and make him a big dime? But big dime linebacker. But no, those interesting guy. I'm really, Tyson's one of the guys that again kind of flies under the radar, but he's one of the guys I'm most excited to see during the week.
Yeah, I mean, Tyson, very similar. J-Ron Kearse a few years ago coming out of Clemson and really found a home this year playing for Dan Quinn with the Dallas Cowboys. Jim, this has been awesome. I know you guys spent an entire year. It all culminates this week in Mobile. Best of luck to you and your staff. Have a great week.
All right, Fran. Thanks for having me on. Love doing it, man. Thank you.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, so good stuff there from Jim. Always great to have him on. Obviously, a huge week for Jim as the action gets underway here in Mobile, Alabama. Let's welcome in Chris McPherson, who has been on the show basically on a weekly basis all through the fall with our On the Clock segment. C-Mac, it's officially draft season for you. How's it feel?
Are we ever going to get the scoreboard, the final tally of On the Clock? Are we still doing it?
Well, it was a tie. It ended in a tie. When you gave Ben that win at the end, that evened it all up. So
when
we
Ben
decided we would walk away. We don't want there to be any kind of debate about the overtime rules when it came to On the Clock. So we said, let's just put this to bed. Ben's the tie, and we'll go on from there.
Yeah, Ben's going to be salty all throughout the draft season. Great.
That's right.
All right.
So let's get into this conversation with Jim. And I thought that a good way for some of our listeners who may be just joining us that would say all right, we just heard some of the big names from Jim Nagy. What are some of the big notable takeaways? So you obviously listened to the segment. I'm interested to get your thoughts on some of the big takeaways. We can go item by item here on your list.
All right, I'll try to go through these quickly. I was trying not to have too many, but a lot of great information from that conversation. I'll start with the quarterbacks. And this is not just a quarterback related point here, but one of the biggest things about the Senior Bowl is seeing how the players interact with each other, because Jim talked a lot about with Kenny Pickett about how he's like that alpha male when being around the other top quarterbacks, that he's had a chance to get to know him as a person because they thought that he was going to be in Mobile possibly a year ago. He had accepted his invite a year ago. So I think that's a big thing you see. And I think that's a thing that a lot of scouts are looking for is how do these guys interact? Is a guy going to take on that leadership role, or is a guy that likes to take a step back? Is the guy going to be first in line for drills? Let's think back to Devontae Smith, that immediately he was the first guy in line at training camp leading the wide receivers in drills. He has that alpha dog mentality. So those are the types of things, those little things that the scouts and coaches and executives are looking for. So the other thing from the quarterbacks, all eyes are going to be on the quarterbacks. There's a lot of great ones there in Mobile, but I'm excited to see Malik Willis, someone who has all those, the big arm, the playmaking ability, but doing it on a stage with other top seniors from around the country. You know, obviously he had the performances he had at Liberty, you know, different level of competition. How is he going to do on the bigger stage? Because I remember Justin Herbert from 2020, how, you know, his arm strength just popped right off the table. You know, things like that. Those are going to be and I think Jimmy even brought this up, that the guys with elite level traits, those things are going to stand out in these live drills. So I'm excited to see who, and not just from the quarterbacks, this goes across the board, who can set themselves out from that standpoint.
It's just kind of a unique scenario, C-Mac, because usually, you know, you and I go to the combine every single year, and one of the benefits of the combine is you get to see the top players at every position go one after the next, after the next, after the next, whether it's receivers running through the gauntlet drill, defensive backs going through different coverage drills, you know, linebackers, D-line running the pads, right? So you get all these examples of seeing these guys one after the other after the other. It's rare that we get this opportunity with all of the top players at a position group that we're going to get here at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, no Matt Corral, who is going to be one of the top quarterbacks selected in this group, almost certainly, right? So I think you look at Matt Corral as the one that's on the outside looking in from this competition, but then you look at all these other guys, it's very likely that these are 6 of the top 7 quarterbacks off the board. And so to me, it just makes for such a unique situation and a fun situation for every team to be able to kind of evaluate all of these players. I think that's going to be a really fun theme to follow this week.
I totally agree. And to add on top of that, this is like the real last football environment where the combine is more drills, it's your workouts, you get to see the throwing drills and whatnot. But in terms of football practice, seeing how they compete in the team environment, this is really their last football chance to make a stand. So, and with everything clustered the way it is, you know, someone like, you know, as Jim said, Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis, both likely first round picks, but how high they go in the first round will largely depend on how they perform this upcoming week in Mobile.
No doubt. All right, well, let's get to the next one here. What's your second takeaway?
Second takeaway, the FCS guys. I'm looking at Christian Watson. You know, first, is he really going to check in at 6'4"? And the way that Jim described how he moves, he's an easy mover. You don't see that from tall, big receivers. So is he really going to be able to move like that? Or is he really going to come in at 6'1", 6'2", and then, you know, that kind of changes some things a bit. So if you can bring that athleticism, that ability to move at a 6'4" frame, that's going to be impressive to watch. And the other thing was that he hasn't been challenged at the FCS level. So how is he going to handle, sort of like Malik Willis, how is he going to handle going up in competition? That's going to be great to watch.
No, it's always a big theme to watch in every Senior Bowl is how do the young guys get to respond? And, you know, Jim alluded to during that conversation, we saw Quinn Miners last year, right, that from Wisconsin Whitewater come in, and he was outstanding, and it helped make himself a second-round pick with the way that he performed in Mobile, coming from a lower level of competition. And we see that almost on a weekly basis, right? Ali Marpet with the Bucs a few years back, Alex Kappa, who also ended up with the Bucs a couple of years ago, right? You see those guys, whether it's from FCS, D2, D3 sometimes even, to come in and have that level of success against some of the best players at their position or at the rival position in the country. It's a huge boost to their stock. So, yeah, I agree. For Christian Watson and some of these other FCS lower level of competition players, huge opportunity here this week. That said, what is your third takeaway from Jim?
Third takeaway. So you have an offensive lineman who trained at IMG in Florida, comes from Australia, 6'9", 380 pounds. And you're like, wait, we're not talking about Jordan Mailata. There's a possible Jordan Mailata clone in Daniel Faalele. That it's going to be so impressive to watch, especially I didn't realize that the bend that he has, that he could possibly move into guard. And I can't imagine a 6'8", 6'9". I can't imagine Jordan Mailata playing on the inside. And I was trying to think, you're a longtime Eagles fan. You remember King Dunlap, who was 6'8", 6'9". I believe he played some guard. I'm trying to think if he played some guard for the Eagles. This was like late 2000s during the Andy Reid era. But just such a massive, massive human being. If he could move anything like Jordan Mailata paving the way for guys who maybe you would think, okay, is someone this big going to be able to really work out? Well, look at what Jordan Mailata has done in such a short time. And Daniel Faalele will have at least the benefit of playing high-level Big 12 competition coming into the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, and that's what I think it's so interesting, because obviously both players arrived to America from Australia having not played the sport. Jordan enters the draft. Daniel Faalele enters college football, and he had offers from everybody. If you go look at it, his recruiting story, he had offers from all the blue bloods. But coming from Australia, he doesn't have an idea of like who the blue bloods are, right? He just wants to go with where he feels most comfortable. He wants to go with who's recruiting him the best. That's how he ends up at Minnesota. And they initially wanted to redshirt him. Like, this guy's never played before. How can we put this guy out there? And then it's training camp that first year, and they're like, yeah, we got to put this guy out there. None of our guys can get past him. So you're just barely scratching the surface there with Daniel Faalele. When you can make those comparisons to guys like, King Dunlap, these other oversized offensive linemen, the difference is that Faalele just has those movement skills that are just so unique. So, yeah, you get the size, but then with that athleticism makes him just so intriguing. That will be a fun player to study here against a really good group of edge rushers. So with that in the books, let's get to your fourth takeaway.
I was going to add three more, and a nice transition. Speaking of the edge rushers, one of the things I love when you and Jim were talking was he's going into his scouting report. He's coming up with comparisons, and you're having similar comparisons, or you have guys who come to mind. I was intrigued by the Cameron Thomas, the San Diego State edge rusher. Now, Jim said that he didn't study Max Crosby, but that's some of the buzz that he's gotten from personnel people around the league. Want to know, in your evaluations and what you've studied, if there's any person who came to mind, or did you write down Max Crosby at any point? I
actually told Jim after that it was Max Crosby was a guy I actually wrote down. I think they're very similar body types, and not only that. When you look at Cameron Thomas, it's not that he's like, oh man, like look at his first step, or he's so powerful, but he's so good with his hands. He's got a wide variety of different rush moves at his disposal. He's got that inside out flexibility, which Max Crosby did at Eastern Michigan. Obviously, they both come from the group of five level, but I think when you look at the level of competitiveness with the hand usage and the well-rounded skill set, I mentioned no elite trait, but I think you check the box. There's no like big weakness either. And that's kind of what Crosby was when he was coming out of EMU. Crosby ended up falling to the fourth round. My guess is Cameron Thomas does not fall to day 3 of the draft. I guess we'll see how he performs this week in one-on-ones. But I had that name written down, and I was so glad that was the first comp that came to mind for Jim. That really stood out to me as well.
That's too funny. So 2 more here. Next up, it's going to be interesting because all the players get to wear their helmets from college. And we're going to go at the linebacker position in Channing Tindall. And you're going to see that Georgia helmet and obviously the phenomenal defense they had on their way to the title this year. But he was a part-time player. He was never a full-time starter. So it'll be interesting putting him on an island in terms of projection, that you're not evaluating him, alongside Nakobe Dean on all the other great players on that Georgia defense. You're focusing on Tindall, and then, okay, what can he be at the next level? And this is a guy who at the second level is going to run, in the high 4.4s, low 4.5s. Whew, that's going to be something. But it's going to be that projection of how come he wasn't a full-time player, a starter on that Georgia defense, and then what does that mean for him going into the next level, not having that level of experience before.
And it's an interesting comparison too, C-Mac, because there's a player playing on defense in this game, Jermaine Johnson, the defensive end from Florida State, who
transferred.
He was at Georgia, wasn't playing. He was a backup and transferred. So he got that 1 year of starting time with Florida State and blew up. He had a career year. He had double-digit sacks. He was constantly in the backfield. He was defending the run. He was doing everything you want from a 3-down player. And so you see both guys, they both end up in the league. And I think, to me, like, it's so funny because, like, especially now with recruiting and the transfer portal, there's all these discussions about, player fits and where should they go to play college. If you're good like the NFL is going to find you. The NFL, whether it's Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, NFLPA Bowl, Combine, undrafted free agent, first round pick, everything in between. It doesn't matter where you play. If you're talented, like the NFL is going to find you. So you do what's right for you. For Jermaine Johnson, hey, I want to play. I want to make sure that I'm trying to improve every single play. For Channing Tindall, it's like, hey, I want to continue to be a great member of this defense. I want to come in and compete with Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker, and I'm going to push them every single day. If I don't start, that's fine. I have faith in my talent that I'm going to play and I'm going to make an impact when I'm out there. And Channing Tindall did that. He was impactful whenever he was out there on the field for the Bulldogs. But I think it's kind of interesting to kind of pair those two guys together, and just an example of how, it's not necessarily, you better go somewhere where you're going to play right away, or you better go somewhere where you're going to always be in the limelight. You're going to play on national TV every week. We were just talking about Cameron Thomas. We were just talking about Daniel Faalele, guys that come from lower levels. Christian Watson, we talked about in this conversation, right? So lower levels of competition, barely played the sport. Maybe you started a bunch of games, right? It doesn't matter. If you're talented, the NFL, the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, everybody, they're going to find you.
So last point here, really a 2-for-1 here. Two guys I want to discuss here in this last point in the secondary. Roger McCreary from Auburn. Love the background story of the hometown kid coming in to Mobile, Alabama, get to play at the Senior Bowl. See, when you talk about the one-on-one matchups and someone who is real feisty and tenacious, like Jim described in the interview, how is he going to handle going against a Christian Watson who's not used to that level of competition? But Roger McCreary obviously is not going to have the size. And I think that's going to be one of the big questions for McCreary coming into this. So looking forward to seeing how he matches up there. And then the other cornerback you talked about, Kobe Bryant out of Cincinnati. Sauce Gardner's getting all the attention, but Kobe Bryant, who was named after the Lakers great, the Lower Merion grad, actually changed his number from 7 to 8 for the college football playoff this past year to honor that Mamba mentality. But very interested to see how he handles, because with Sauce Gardner on the other side, as you guys discussed, Kobe Bryant was getting all the attention. So he's used to being challenged by quarterback. So that part will be interesting. So looking forward to seeing those cornerbacks. But I love the two guys that you mentioned there. McCreary, again, the hometown kid, great story. And then Kobe Bryant, great name, obviously. And then seeing how he does on his own, sort of like the same with Tyndall out of Georgia, being the focal point for teams to look at.
Yeah, it's funny, C-Mac, because when you look at Roger McCreary, one of the big knocks on him coming into the season was so he was, a lot of SEC receivers really took it to him. You watch him against Devontae Smith and all the players. The SEC schedule, you're chock full of stud wide receivers, and McCreary's been in the starting lineup for 3 years. So coming in as a sophomore, as a junior, and playing up against some of the best players in the country at that position week after week after week. There's some bad film out there on 2020, 2019, you go 2018 with Roger McCreary. Then you watch this year and you see this guy just put it all together. He came out on the other side of that adversity and is better for it. And that's what makes him such a really fun player. I think when you look at his competitiveness, his ball skills, his instincts, he's a really, really fun player. And Kobe Bryant, C-Mac, a year ago, we were doing our preview for the Shrine Bowl, which didn't happen, right, because of COVID-19. But I remember having Dan Shanka on here on the Journey of the Draft podcast. We're just going through players. Kobe Bryant was going to go to the Shrine Bowl, ended up taking that extra year. And, I remember Dan kind of saying, look, maybe he's a nickel, maybe he's a safety. We're not sure if he's going to be able to play corner at the next level. He goes back to Cincinnati, has an outstanding year. He wins the Thorpe Award. And look at this. He's one of the first DBs to accept an invitation to the Senior Bowl. So two guys that really helped themselves here with their senior season.
Now, was he a bonus senior? Or was he a guy who came back because of COVID?
He's a fifth-year senior. He took that extra year of eligibility. There's a bunch of guys that are down here at the Senior Bowl with that eligibility. That guy that took advantage of that fifth year. There are a bunch. You mentioned Kenny Pickett earlier, Tariq Castro Fields. There were a handful of guys that actually had the invite a year ago. Zion Johnson from Boston College is one, accepted an invitation. They were going to the Senior Bowl, but then took that extra year of eligibility, went back. So there's a handful of those guys in Mobile this week. And look, we've got a lot that we are going to cover over the course of this week. Obviously, daily podcast covering the action from Mobile, Alabama. One big thing you're going to see in your coverage, not necessarily here on this podcast, but just looking around at whether it's print coverage, audio coverage, video coverage of this event and every other All-Star game, is just the role of the presence of scouts, the presence of all NFL teams in attendance. And one of the big things, and C-Mac, that comes out every single year is Oh, Team X was seen talking to player Y. Oh, Team X is seen to be talking about, they talked to these positions, and look at all you're tracking all the different guys they've talked to. Here's all I'm going to say. We've had so many NFL scouts on over the course of the last few years. This week here in the Senior Bowl, we're going to talk with some Eagles personnel this week as well. But when you look at the way that teams approach the Senior Bowl, you are sending a crew of your scouts down, and literally, you're the West Coast area scout, you're the Southeast scout, whatever it is. You are in charge of watching this position group every single day. You are in charge of after practice is over, you're going to go and you're going to talk to the guys that are in your area. And so you're an area scout. Hey, I'm watching offensive linemen, and that's all I'm watching all day long. I'm not paying attention to anything else. All I'm watching is offensive line. And now everybody gets together and you share your thoughts. You're going to go through the film later and take advantage of everybody else. But I think when you look at the way that teams are approaching, covering the Senior Bowl and making sure that you dot all your I's, cross all your T's, that's the thought process coming into this week. Everybody is going to talk with everybody. No stone left unturned. That's the goal here this week for scouting staffs across the NFL.
That's not going to stop a bunch of tweets being posted.
Of course not. No,
it's a warning. It's like the combine. Did you, the Team X reporter, did you speak with our team? Did you speak with this team? Did you speak with that team? Yeah, most likely they have spoken with each and every team by some point. So, in fact, over the course of the week, pretty much the teams can get up to an hour with every guy.
Yes.
If they play their cards right, if they maximize their time, they'll get to spend an hour. And it's interesting for the scouts because they've been doing a lot of the homework on them. They've been doing the film study. They've watched these guys in person. Now they're getting the opportunity to talk to them, to get to know them as people, and to find out if they're the right culture fit. So obviously you're trying to marry the football side with the culture, chemistry, teammate aspect of it as well. And that goes back to what I said at the beginning of the segment here with Kenny Pickett. It's how do these guys interact with each other? What kind of roles? What kind of teammates are they? If they have a bad play, what's their body language like? How do they bounce back? These are the little things that teams are studying all throughout the week coming up.
Yep, no doubt. It's absolutely one of the biggest weeks of the year when it comes to the draft calendar. But I think that it's important for everybody to just realize that, like, every team, their goal is to come in and talk to everybody. Sometimes it's seen by the media. Other times it's not seen by the media. Sometimes it's reported. Their agents come out and report. Sometimes it's not, right? So just assume that your favorite team is going to talk with pretty much every single player in attendance at the Senior Bowl. That's the scouts and teams all doing their due diligence across the board. And speaking of scouts, we're going to wrap things up here in this week's episode with our final edition of our Scout Story segment. The Eagles Director of Player Personnel, Brandon Brown, he has stopped by to talk through the wide receiver position and some of the big things to look for when projecting them from college to the NFL.
Pull up a seat. It's time for Scout Stories.
All right, well, let's get into Scout Stories here as I welcome in Eagles Director of Player Personnel, Brandon Brown, to talk about the wide receiver position. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us once again here on the show.
Fran, pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
So let's talk through wide receiver. Obviously, a position that everybody, I think, fans, media, everybody loves watching wide receivers, talking about wide receivers, putting their scouting hat on and watching, and trying to evaluate and project wide receivers. What is it that makes it so hard to be able to project these guys to the NFL? Because obviously, it's a passing league and it's a passing game. Everybody's throwing the ball. Everybody's putting up big numbers.
Yeah, that's a great question, Fran. And I think obviously, everyone loves wide receiver position. It's one of the quote unquote sexy positions. And obviously from the, data standpoint and the statistical standpoint, it's something that, you can quantify, especially early on in their career on, success and growth pattern. But, especially projecting the wide receiver position from the college level, I think there's some difficulties that don't show up on paper, right? And what, I kind of go at it from the grassroots aspect where you get a lot of these high level four-star, five-star wide receivers, coming from high school, and they're the better athletes. Well, the college's role is to get them on the field as soon as possible, right? Because the degree of talent between top level wide receiver and corner at the college level, it's wide. And I think with that, a lot of these receivers, come in and maybe line up with wristbands or a lot of minimal mental intensity in terms of alignment on the job. So then when you fast forward and you get them into the NFL system, there's a lot that goes on pre-snap, right? Whether it's understanding the playbook may be a little bit more intensive, understanding the verbiage of a play, your assignment. You may be forced to align not just on some guys align just one side of the ball in college. Sometimes you get guys that only align to actually their sideline in college. So I just think as you transfer to the NFL, you got to learn, one, you may be shifting in different positions, whether it's, X, Z slot, or one side, or handling multiple duties that you haven't had. And I think one of the most unknown or less talked about aspects that I think is so much different than the college level is releasing versus press coverage. I think the degree in difficulty at the NFL level of releasing versus press coverage is so difficult, where you do see sometimes a hitch in the development of year one receivers that make a huge jump in year two. Because NFL DBs corners are longer, they have more strength, and frankly, the degree of skill is so much higher at the NFL level between your average, talking about the average college corner, where the ability to release and get open is harder, and there's less separation at the NFL level. So I just think those are the less quantifiable things that show up, why you may see some of the tougher projections from wide receivers going from college to the NFL. And just at the NFL level, the consistency and being able to win one-on-one matchups and be able to win at all three levels is the biggest thing that separates the guys that are just average performers versus the guys that are, the gotta have it guys that you want to create plays for, because they can separate, win off the line of scrimmage, and win their matchups, not just only short, intermediate, but also on the deep part of the field. So it kind of keeps you on the defensive standpoint, not knowing whether, hey, is this guy going to be one dimensional? Is he only a deep flyer? Or this is a guy that, can separate and come out of his intermediate breaks and threaten you there? And is this a guy that can take a screen and has the functional strength, to create, yards after the catch and take a bubble screen and take it to whether it's 10, 15 or an explosive for 20 plus.
So much to unpack there. And I'm glad that you brought up the mental aspect of it and basically started with that aspect, because, you talk about whether it's defeating press coverage, yards after catch. If you're mentally behind, you have so much going through your head pre-snap that it's hard to then try and focus on what's the leverage of the DB? How am I going to beat him on this play? Oh, this is my route. This is my assignment. So if you're not there mentally, the physical stuff then doesn't always show up.
100%. And also when it goes into versatility in routes, and when you look into certain college systems, they may, if you're a speed guy who may have some stiffness, or you're just raw and haven't been exposed to many routes in your college system, you may have only just run majority, maybe crossers, verticals. But then when you get to the NFL and maybe you're asked to do some of the intermediate routes, and you may be maybe a 4-4 guy, you may play like a mid 4-5 guy because you become what we call, a step counter, right? You have your landmark of where you need to be at your breaks. And because you're not used to running these routes in your head as a receiver, you start to count your steps and look towards your landmark. And then you may telegraph your break, and you may give a tell of when you're coming to balance to throttle down, which makes it easy for the DB to sit on a route. And then, you're not playing to your quote unquote time speed, and you see a guy that, you love on college tape and say, hey, well, why isn't he running as fast, or why isn't he playing as fast? Because, that mental aspect still may not be smoothed out. And that's when you see, you got to get a guy, I like to say, you make that biggest jump from year one to year two when you have that full off season to be fully immersed in the fundamentals and the all the nuances that, you may not had in terms of going into your year one coming from your college program.
And I've used the analogy here on the show before about learning how to type. You're a kid, you're learning how to type for the first time. And when you're learning, your fingers are latched to the home row, they're right in the middle of the keyboard, and you're sitting there staring and you're wondering how come my words per minute is so low? It's because you're sitting there, you're still looking, you're still trying to find your way around the keys. It takes time before you're able to just look at your screen and be able to type without looking. Same thing with receivers as they're trying to learn, run routes and not have to count those steps. So
that's right. Yeah. That's right. Year one, you're pecking on the keyboard, and then hopefully year two, year three, it's smooth and you got your fingers on the home key and you're not looking down. And that's kind of equate that as not looking down at the home key. It's think of it as having coverage awareness, right? Yeah. If you're running against zone and just knowing in terms of just feeling the soft spots in coverage, knowing if based on formation, the safety may be drifting towards the opposite side. So you know that there may be a hole once you beat the corner in your certain intermediate pattern where you can hang. And it just becomes second nature. It's say, hey, you see it and you commit it to memory. I just think that maturation process, it happens sooner for some than others. And, once it clicks and it matches all the physical traits, the height, weight, speed, things, everything from the fan base, the personnel, coaching, and ownership saw. I think that's when you get the perfect marriage.
What's the best piece of advice? I love asking this question in this segment. What's the best piece of advice you've gotten, from a mentor, or from a coach, from anyone that you've been around when it comes to evaluating a wide receiver position?
Yeah, I think it's look in terms of, does he have the skill set in his body to do more? And when I say the skill set in his body to do more is, what has he been tasked, and know what he's been tasked at his current place. So at his university, has he only been asked to run a certain route tree? And when you're watching the tape, don't write him off as saying, hey, he has a limited route tree. This may be what he's been called in terms of the task for his program. But look at what he has in his body. If he's a guy that's more often not, throwing high volume bubble screens, and say your current offensive scheme at the NFL level calls for maybe some intermediate routes, maybe some vertical game, and you say, hey, well, I don't know if he tracks it well enough, right, vertically. You have to look for situations that you may have to see him do these things that aren't in the game. Like that's if you're in the college side, going to see him at practice. Whether it's maybe a pre-practice pat and go, maybe it's warm-ups, maybe it's at his pro day in terms of you're putting together a script where say, hey, I need to see him run these certain routes. And to help validate, because if you know, hey, this guy has great explosiveness off the line of scrimmage, he's a ground gainer in terms of he eats up yardage and he can close DB cushion quickly. So I see the ability in his body to threaten vertically, even though his offensive system in college doesn't call for it. Now I want to say, hey, can he track it consistently? So you want to make sure you hit him on those things when you go to those pro days and those workouts, pre-draft process. And then also you want to make sure that, hey, maybe he doesn't run a ton of intermediate routes, but this guy has loose hips and you can see him sink and do certain things that would equate to being a good intermediate route runner. Or say if he lines primarily on the perimeter, but you think he has all the release mechanics and zone awareness to actually offer slot flexibility. Well, then you get more value on the player. You're not just evaluating him for where he lines up currently and what he does in his college program, but also having a bigger appreciation for we can do more and there's more meat on the bone based on his actual athletic skill set.
And I've had this conversation with people because when you look at receiver, so often they're the last guy to touch the ball, obviously, right? So a lot of these numbers, a lot of these metrics that people will use to try and stack guys and look at it from an analytical standpoint, one of the big ones that people will point to is average depth of target. And it's like, well, that's a usage stat. That's not necessarily like a proficiency stat. That just shows how he was used in the scope of that offense. There are guys that are run 4.3 and maybe they're running a ton of speed sweeps and they're catching the ball behind the line of scrimmage, or they're going to take these shallow crosses within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage. Yeah, that ADOT's going to be a lot lower than a guy that was used as a vertical threat or an intermediate threat running deep digs and deep over routes. It's to me, exactly what you said. Like you're looking at the skill set, what the guy shows in his body to be able to project that forward.
Correct. You don't want to penalize guys for their usage. They're only doing what they're being asked to do in their current program. And, it's our job in the scouting department and in working in conjunction with the coaching staff. Can this guy handle the tasks that we need to have a successful wide receiver for our offense? And if the answer is yes, you got to put him through the ringer on every drill and all nuances to make sure he can handle the task.
So the last question I've got for you, obviously the Eagles selecting Devontae Smith in the first round this past April, a guy that did check so many of those boxes where you talk about like the route diversity, the ability to go up and win at the catch point, and then especially and this is undersold with him, the mental aspect of the game and everything that he brings to the table. What was your evaluation of Devontae and your experience with him during that pre-draft process a few months back?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, Devontae is a scout's dream in terms of at wide out when you look at all the boxes you need to check. And when I say all the boxes you need to check, you look at the critical factors and the position specifics and you say, hey, release. Can you win off the line of scrimmage? Check. Can he create separation on the top or intermediate routes? and make it be an easy target for for the quarterback? Check. Hands and ball skills, contested situations, sideline throws, red zone throws. Can he pluck away from his frame? Can he adjust and torque his body and adjust to low balls? Check. And then you look at the position specifics, right? The run after catch. Can he take a screen and create an explosive? Check. Is he a ground gainer? Can he threaten DB's coverage and be a guy that can win on all three levels, short, intermediate, and vertical? Check. Coverage awareness. Does he find the soft spot of zone? Does he have high mental aptitude? Can he align in the slot? Can he bump outside? Can he be that movable chess piece that you can create plays for? Check. Big playability. Can he take a screen and turn it into an explosive 20 plus? Does he have good deep ball tracking skills? Can he catch the ball, seeing it over the left side shoulder and then track it over the right and adjust and while fighting off a DB? Check. So I just look at all those things that I'm going down the checklist. You're saying check, 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 and check. And it's one of those things where you get excited because it's hard to find a wide receiver that can do all the things physically, but also handle the mental rigors of the position. And then to me, the biggest thing of hitting your ceiling as a receiver, and when you see a lot of guys that don't hit their ceiling, it's okay. Well, what is his preparation day to day, and from Sunday through Friday at the college level? Does he have a systemized, regimented plan to hit his ceiling? Because he's going to need that in NFL. And you look at Devontae, and he does it. He's a grown adult. And when I say that, he understands mastery of his task. He's going to put time on hand. Last guy to leave the practice field. Someone that focuses on the nuances. And when you focuses on the nuances, they become committed to memory. Just like we talked about guys that master route running and it becomes secondhand, it just becomes like typing on the keyboard, becomes so smooth and effortless. He has so many of those traits that get you excited, where not only can he be a guy that you feed, he becomes a guy that becomes a pillar of your program because he has all the work ethic and skill sets that will permeate through his room and onto the offensive side of the ball with the rest of the guys there. So can't say enough good things about the young man, and excited for his future.
Well, Brandon, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for joining us here once again on the Journey to the Draft podcast to talk about wide receiver play.
No, I appreciate it, Fran. I appreciate you having me here, and Fran, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
So really good stuff there from Brandon Brown. Obviously, the point about what I personally loved was the player development aspect, where for colleges, look, they want to get their most athletic guys on the field. So it's not necessarily all about preparing them for the NFL. They're going to do what they need to get their playmakers the football and get them to them fast. So maybe they're not teaching them every single part of playing the position, but I thought that was a really interesting nugget there from Brandon talking about wide receivers and looking at the route diversity. I loved the analogy that we kind of came up with together in terms of you're learning to type and staying along the home row. When you're first learning to type, you're watching the keys, and the more you do it, now all of a sudden your eyes are up on your screen and not looking down at the home row, kind of comparing that to route running. I thought that was a really fun analogy. I was really glad we were able to kind of eke that out of that discussion. Then obviously the scouting report from Brandon from Devontae Smith and what we saw from him this year as a rookie. Great stuff with Devontae Smith as a rookie. Great season from him this season in 2021. Great stuff from Brandon Brown all season long. Hope you guys have enjoyed my conversations with Brandon Brown, Anthony Patch, Ian Cunningham, and of course, Alan Walking every single week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Now, we are going to be breaking stuff down every single day from here on out. Make sure you stay tuned for our mock draft only, Senior Bowl only talent tomorrow. That's going to be with Ben and with Dane. We'll also put a little bit of a ribbon on the Shrine Bowl as well. We'll do that at the end of tomorrow's episode. Make sure you stay tuned. We'll have practice recaps every single day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right here on the feed. Get you all ready for Saturday's game. We're going to break it all down right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.